Alright guys, welcome to your inspirational stories for today. The first person we're going to look at is Amina Gurib Fakim. Amina is or was the president of Mauritius and is also a scientist. In an island nation in the Indian Ocean called Mauritius, there lived a girl who wanted to know everything about plants. Her name was Amina. Amina studied biodiversity. She analysed hundreds of aromatic and medicinal herbs and flowers. She studied their properties and travelled to rural villages to learn from traditional healers how to use plants in their rituals. For Amina, plants were like friends. Her favourite tree was the baobab because it is so useful. It stores water in its trunk, its leaves can cure infections, and its fruit, called monkey apple, contains more proteins than human milk. Amina thought that a lot could be learned from plants. Plants like benjoin, for example, the leaves of benjoin are different shapes and sizes. Animals won't eat plants they don't recognise, so they tend to leave this plant alone. Quite smart, don't you think? Amina thought of plants as living biological labs, full of vital information for humans and every other species. Every time a forest is cut down, we lose an entire laboratory, a lab that we will never, ever recover. Amina Gurib was elected president of Mauritius, and every day she fights hard for all the inhabitants of her country, people, animals, and of course, plants. So Amina was born in 1959, so that would make her, about 70 years old now? No, 60 years old. So she was a botanist and later became president of her country. Second person we're going to look at is Alan Turing. During the Second World War, countries would speak to each other using codes to prevent their enemies from understanding their messages. The most important and difficult code was used by the Germans. It was called Enigma. Britain desperately needed to crack it. If they could, they'd know all of their enemies' secrets, including their next moves. But it was almost impossible. There was only one person they could think of who might be able to help: Alan Turing. Alan had loved numbers ever since he was a child. He wasn't encouraged at school, but when he got to university, Alan flourished. He was studying pure mathematics. Then his unusual way of thinking led him to look for practical ways of using maths. He wanted to change the way people lived in a useful manner. He published a paper that turned out to signal the beginning of modern computers. Once I'd brought him in, Alan helped the government break the Enigma code by building a machine called the bomb. Some people think that by cracking the code, Alan shortened the war by 4 years, which would mean he saved millions of lives. In 1952, police heard rumours that he was gay. At the time, being gay was still a crime, and he was arrested. Alan was found guilty. Even after what he had done for the country, he was given the choice of jail or taking drugs that would supposedly change him. He chose the drugs and they made him sick. It hurt so much that he poisoned himself and died. But he was never forgotten. 61 years later, in 2013, Alan was granted a posthumous royal pardon, and 4 years after that, in 2017, Turing's law was passed, pardoning all men who had ever been convicted of anything related to being gay. His great niece, Rachel Barnes, thinks it's tremendous, but wants people to remember that Alan was a lot more than just his sexuality. He was an incredibly intelligent, devoted, and forward-thinking person who helped save the lives of countless others. Alright, so there are your two stories for today of inspirational people. On one note, there'll be a couple of questions posed up there for you. Please have a think about both of these stories, and then on the collaboration space, reflect on the questions that are posed.